Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks so much for tuning in to this Libsyn Live, where we're going to be talking about getting your podcast off the ground. I'm Dave Jackson, the head of podcaster education here at Libsyn, and we are using a little different format than we normally do here. So we have a minor, I hate to call it rules because that makes people freak out, but today we have the chat over there. You see it, and when you ask a question, we just want you to put a Q, like Q colon, and then your question. And that's going to trigger us to hold that for you so that I can answer that question later. The first question, as always, is we're going to answer that one right now. Yes, this is being recorded. Yes, you can watch this later. So keep that in mind. But we are always interested in your questions, and sometimes we'll answer them right when you ask, and other times I'll be taking breaks along the way here. We're going to break things into a couple different segments as we go along. In fact, let me kind of show you where we're headed. We're going to start off with entering your podcast, how to create an episode, how to promote your episode, and how to monitor your success. But before we get to that, if you love podcasting, who doesn't love podcasting, but podcasting information, we have a ton of this on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked it out, there's a lot of stuff over there, from everything from like this one, kind of a how to get up and going for beginners, and how to grow your audience and how to monetize. It's all there on our YouTube channel. So go over there and you know the drill. You hit the subscribe button, you smash the like and the bell and the whole nine yards so that you get notified when all that awesome information ends up on YouTube, because you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. There's some really good stuff. I know I'm a tad, I think I'm like an episode or two behind, and I got to get caught up. But the great thing about YouTube, of course, you can watch it on your phone. I watch mine on my TV now, which is great to see Elsie in, like, she's life size in my living room now. So that's always fun. So check it out again, youtube.com/Libsyn. And so, as I said, this is where we're going to today. And so, again, before I jump in, put a Q before that question in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those. But we're going to kind of do this in chunks. We're going to talk about how to set up my podcast, and then I'll come over and see if we have any questions. And then we'll go into like how to create an episode, and then I'll take a little breather. I also probably take a sip of water just to keep my throat going. And along the way, we'll just it's super casual. We're here to have some fun and answer some questions. So let's get going here. So where we're going is, this is a list of names here: Tom Hanks, Garth Brooks, Meryl Streep, who is in Murders in the Building. If you have Hulu, it's a podcast-based show. But Meryl Streep, Jason Sudeikis, better known as Ted Lasso, Michelle Obama, Eddie Van Halen, Viola Davis, and Aquafina all have something in common. What is it, Dave? It is the fact that they all have imposter syndrome. And that is the whole, why would anyone listen to me? And Garth Brooks was actually awarded like some sort of platinum supersized, album award in New York City. And he was convinced, because he's a country boy and he's in the big city, that nobody was going to listen to him. And basically 1 million people showed up in Central Park there. And so if you are thinking, nobody's going to listen to me, yes, they will, because you've got your whole lifestyle, you've got your insights and your experiences. You are a unique person. And so don't be like Garth Brooks, basically hiding in his hotel room thinking no one's going to show up. No, people will listen. Now, they can't listen if it's in your head or on your hard drive. You got to get it out there. So just keep that in mind. That's fairly normal to have that feeling. I know I have that feeling from time to time. And when you get started, you don't have to spend a gazillion dollars on gear. The Samson Q2U, the Audio Technica ATR 2100. There's a few microphones, and what's great about that one, you see the three little pins there. That means you can use it with like an interface, but it's also USB, so you can just plug it directly into your computer. All those under $100, and so you don't have to spend a lot of money. This is a Zoom PodTrack P4. It is, I call it the Swiss Army knife of podcasting, because you could have 4 people in the room with you. You could plug it in and record a Zoom call. If somebody, like, I don't have a computer, you could actually plug a phone into it and record it that way, and everybody hears everybody. Less than $200. for that. Now, 5, 10 years ago, that was about $1,000 for, whatever brand was making it at the time. But again, you don't have to spend a gazillion dollars. There are more expensive options. This is the Focusrite Vocaster. And if you're looking for something that is, wow, I just need simple, this one, you hold down a button and talk to it, and it basically sets the levels for you. And you can then tie it into your laptop or your computer and use a free program like Audacity to record your show. If you have a budget, this is the granddaddy. This is the Rodecaster Pro. This one's around, I want to say $700 or $800. It does a lot. And if you, again, 4 people in the same room with you, etc., but you don't have to start this. A lot of people go, oh, I don't have enough money for that. And you're like, yeah, you kind of don't need that in many cases. It's kind of overkill, but it is pretty and it has lots of pretty lights. So I know I have one and I love it. But let's go ahead and play now with Libsyn. And again, if you have any questions along the way, in the chat room, just put a little Q before it, and we will head off here to answer some questions. So we're going to start off with, how do I set up my show? And so as we look at this, I have creatively named this show Dave's Test Show. So along the way, as we go through this, you will see where I may not go. I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit so everybody can see things a little better. Along the way here, if you're wondering why I'm not actually publishing an episode or why am I not doing, I'm not going all the way through. This is just something I use to play with. But this is our dashboard. When you first log in, you'll see a list of how many downloads you have, any announcements, things that are going on with Libsyn. Here's your latest episodes. And down here, you've got quick links to your feed, your website. If you want to put a player on a website, you have this here, as well as I can pick what episode I want here, and then how much space you have left for the month. So that's just a quick look at your dashboard. And the great thing is it doesn't matter what page you're on in Libsyn, you always have this new button here in the upper right-hand corner. And then to the right of that is where we're going to start. And that is your settings button. And then to the right of that is your actual profile. So if you ever want to change your password or something like that, that's under here. But we're going to go to settings. And you'll see when you click on this, these are those features that often you set up once and never have to kind of go back. So your podcast is something that you might set up and maybe go back later, but a lot of times you kind of just set it and forget it. So I've clicked on podcast here. I can see where I'm at. I'm under settings and podcast. And here I've creatively named my show Dave's Test Show. Now, for me, a great example of a name is when you can say to somebody, I'm doing a podcast called blank. And they go, oh, is it about such and such? And you go, as a matter of fact, it is. I had a friend of mine was going to do a show called After the Darkness. And I said, And I said, go ask some people. I'm doing a show called, After the Darkness. After the Darkness. What do you think it's about? And somebody said vampires, and somebody else said, isn't that a band from the 90s? And I asked him again, I said, what's your show about again? And he said, it's my life after blindness. I go, that's the name of your show. It has the keyword in there of blindness. It's really obvious. And so you can have like a super obvious name and then have some sort of tagline, maybe if you want to get a little more detailed on like, here's the obvious name and then here's who it's for. And the beautiful thing about everything we're talking about here when we're setting up our podcast is you can always change it later. So if you're thinking, oh, I got to get this perfect. Look, we always aim at perfect, and sometimes we miss, and we end on really, really good. But you can always change this later. Nothing's set in stone where you're like, oh, sorry, that's your answer. We are not Jeopardy here at Libsyn. We will accept your second and third answer if you got a different one. So that's your name, and then your description, and I just have this generic kind of formula. Hey, we help whoever your target audience is do whatever the heck those people are trying to do so that they can benefit. And that's the one I see a lot of people forget. The whole like, we interview interesting people about interesting things. Okay, so what's the benefit? So you can do this, so don't forget to throw in the benefit, because who doesn't want to benefit? I want to benefit. So throw that in there. And then here, you should tell listeners what kind of content you talk about, explain how people can benefit from listening. You get the idea. And this is actually from Apple, this paragraph here. So they seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to podcast. Down here, you got your artwork. That should be anywhere from 1,400 by 1,400 all the way up to 3,000 by 3,000. and the file size should be less than 500 kilobytes. And if you ever have any questions about those types of topics, we do have the big I down here. We'll talk about this a little later, but you can always click there, go to our knowledge base and type in artwork, and we've got a lovely tutorial on that. When I come down here, category 1 and category 2, these are the categories that are used in Apple and Google and the different apps. So these are the ones that you can pick. And I realize that sometimes you click on these and you're like, Dave, none of these really fit my show. Well, pick the one that's the closest, because sometimes it's not an exact match. They do have a lot of categories, but sometimes you get that really niche show and you're like, it doesn't really fit any of these. Pick the closest one you can. And if you can't decide between this one or that one, well, then put 2 in. So you can do that. Another artwork here on the right, and again, you'll notice this says fake because this is just a test show, is there are some social destinations, but especially YouTube, will use a wide image. So you can actually have Libsyn convert your audio to a video and post it to YouTube for you. So that's what the widescreen is about. If we come down a little further, this is your name, basically the owner name. So that's me. And in this case, if you ever wondered, that is our community manager, Elsie Escobar. So I've got her name there. You have your email address there, so you can put that in. And the author name is very often the same as the owner name. So I've got those duplicated here. And then your website URL. Now, if the goal of your podcast is to drive traffic to your website, then you want to put your website there. Libsyn doesn't know when you first sign up, do you have a website or not? So we put in our Libsyn page there because there are places like Mrs. Johnson's, 7th grade class. Well, they don't have their own website, so they can use the Libsyn website for that. But if you are a business or an entrepreneur and you already have your own website, be sure to update that to point to your website. And then if you know your schedule, you'll see here where you can choose from a number of these, or if you have I don't really know what my schedule is, you can set that to no set schedule. And then this third party right, if you're like, what the heck does that mean? You'll notice we have all these little kind of little eyes next to the options here. And if I click on that, it'll give me a quick description. And it's basically kind of referring to, like, if I had music in my podcast, do I have the rights to actually play that or not? So you can see here where I could choose, hey, I don't have any third-party content. And if I do, well, yeah, I've got the rights to it. So some apps want to know that. So that's one. You'll notice that has an asterisk, and anything with an asterisk needs to be filled in. And then your type. So most of the time it's episodic. That just means you can listen to the podcast in whatever order you want. If you want to listen to episode 1 and then 7 and then 46, you can. It's episodic. But what if I'm doing some sort of audiobook or a fiction podcast? It's a story and you need to start at the beginning. Then you could choose serial. And what that does is, in some apps, but not all, it will actually put the first episode first and then second and third. But not all apps, but most of them are starting to catch on to that. Then you have, is your show clean or explicit? And if you have to ask, it's explicit 9 times out of 10. I always say, just picture, I don't know, a 6-year-old in the car with you. Would you play your podcast? And the answer is like, probably not. Well, then be sure to market that. Now, when you market explicit, realize there are some countries that have strict guidelines, and you may actually be removed from different versions of Apple in different countries that don't like those types of words. So keep that in mind. Whereas if you would just bleep them out, you could leave it as clean. So it's one of those fun little details. So clean or explicit, and then what language, that's one's fairly self-explanatory. And then you have an episode display limit. In other words, how many episodes do you want to be in the apps? Well, right now I have this set to 0. I think the default is 100. And what happens sometimes is, let's say I had this set to 50. And then I put out episode 51. Well, what's going to happen is, here's episode 50 through 1, right? It's kind of labeled backwards. And then when I come out with episode 51, episode 1 falls off. And people are like, hey, what happened to my first episode? So that's why a lot of people will just come in and say, hey, you know what? Just show them all. And when you put a 0, that means show them all. So if I've got 50, 100, 300, whatever, It's there. Then down here, the copyright, I just have 2023. Some people will put the name of their show. Some people will put their name. It's your show. You can decide what goes in there. And then with Libsyn, Libsyn is short for Liberated Syndication. And we're always trying to help you grow your audience. And so we do have a directory, kind of like Apple, that is helping to spotlight people. And it's a place where people can search and find your show. So you can do that. And you're like, why would you not want that? There are some people that want a private show. They don't want it going everywhere. So we always have that option if you want to keep it private. But you fill this out, and basically at the bottom, you'll see there's a save button. And when you do that, everything we just typed in here is saved. It will probably yell at me. In fact, let's do that just to show you. I'm going to go ahead and leave this now. One thing I forgot to mention, I was talking about artwork. We do integrate with Canva. Canva is a program. They have a free and a paid version. So if you're like, look, I don't know Photoshop, you can actually go into Canva and just say, I need to, design podcast artwork. And they have a bunch of kind of templates you can use. And you just go in and change the name and maybe update a picture, and it's there. So it's a really popular tool. And that's why Libsyn now integrates with that for both the square and the wide image. But here, if I say, hey, I'm done with this, and I want to go back to my dashboard, I'm pretty sure it's going to yell at me. I can't remember if I made any. Yep, it's saying, hey, Dave, you didn't save your changes. So if you ever see that, all you have to do is come down and say, oh, I guess I did make some changes. So I'll click on save, and you'll see this, hey, that worked. You're done. You've saved that. Now I can go back up to the top and click on dashboard. And I've done step one of setting up my podcast. So all you need is your title, your artwork, and a description. You fill out a couple forms, and step one is done. So with that, I'm going to run over here real quick and see how things are going in the chat room. I don't think we have anything. Oh, here we go. What is the feed locked switch for? This is a feature where, it's one of those things, in the immortal words, I'm going to date myself, of Cyndi Lauper, money changes everything. Google it. And what happened was there were really, really popular shows. And there are some free media hosts out there that if you had enough downloads, you could put ads against. So what would happen is people would basically steal your show. They would go and grab your RSS feed and upload it to this free host and then run ads against it. Well, we needed a way to stop that. So the feed locked switch is basically saying, hey, if somebody tries to import my feed into another media host, I have to okay it. So you actually get an email that says, hey, so-and-so this has been imported. Do you approve? And if you click on approve, it'll let them copy your information over. So it's just an added level of security, almost like two-factor authentication. Now, if somebody wants to, if you ever, for whatever reason, want to move from Libsyn, that's a way of blocking it. So it doesn't happen as much as it did. That was an issue for a bit, but as always, a problem popped up in podcasting. Libsyn came up with a solution. It's a feature that just, like I said, money changes everything. And somebody else here has a question. Is it still the case that one episode marked explicit marks the entire podcast explicit? Yep. So what he's asking there is the fact that if I go into one episode and somebody drops a naughty word, if I mark that explicit, because you can do this on the show level, which we just saw, but you can also do it on the episode level. And if I mark one episode as, hey, this one's got explicit language in it, it is a case of one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. It's not really spoiled, though, but you get the idea. But it is one episode can then remove you from some of the Middle Eastern countries that don't like that kind of content. So keep that in mind. So again, how we did all that was we were over here under settings, and then we went to podcasts. So now we want to make a new episode, because before we start publishing it and sending it to Apple and all these places, you need to have at least one episode published. If I go to new, upload audio, and so here, what I could do is if I click on add a media file, and I'm going to go over here to podcasts. This is the one thing I switched computers today, and it dawned on me that, I don't have any fake podcasts here. We'll do this one. And I'm just going to upload this real quick. Here, I got a trailer. Let's do this. Okay. So what's fun about this is you get a little progress bar and you'll see here, see how it disappeared for like a half a second? It's okay if you panic the first time that happens. You're like, hey, what happened? But we just saw that success window come up. So that disappears for a second and then it says, hey, you've uploaded this successfully. And so I've got my episode uploaded. I can come down here and this is where your title, this is something you need to remember. They see you before they hear you. So you want your title to either A, let them know what's in the episode. So don't get cute and use a bunch of inside jokes. Make it very obvious again. Have your keywords in there. And the end result is you want people to go, oh, I want to hear that. So if you like, I'm not sure if I should call it this or that, or maybe even this. Which one of those should I do? Which one makes you want to click more? That's the title that's going to work the best. So in this case, I'll say Elsie, found, typing in front of people, so much pressure. A great microphone for, $70. Okay. Over here, is this a full episode, which just means normal, right? Your typical episode. Is it a trailer? And trailers are kind of neat. Some apps will actually position your trailer right at the top of your listing. So if people are like, they've got some pretty cool titles, they've got good artwork, maybe I should listen to this. Well, you've got a trailer to click on. If you don't want to make a trailer, you don't have to. Again, you're in control. Or if it's a bonus episode. So I've done something that's different. It's not the typical episode. It's kind of, episode 2.5. It's in between 2 and 3. You could call it a bonus episode, but this is just going to be a full. If you're going to use seasons, you can. Some people do that. And usually seasons, they were invented for the kind of NPR style shows where you hear the list of names at the end that's about 15 people. Dave Jackson was the storyboard editor. Maria Bamford was the, blah, 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 and going on. Well, those people need to take a break when their season is over. And so that's kind of where seasons came from. Or if you want to organize things by topic. Many people don't use seasons at all. And then here you put in your episode numbers. So that's one thing I want to point out. If you want to put episode titles in or episode numbers in your titles, I would recommend putting them at the end. I personally don't. I know Rob Walsh loves episode numbers at the end. It's your show. You decide. The bottom line is if you go over here, though, Apple really, really, really doesn't want episode numbers in the title. So I always say, if you have them over here, this is all the other apps. This area is just for Apple because Apple wants you to put the number here. And sometime when you're bored, ask the woman on your iPhone to play your show episode blank. And if you've got the number in there, sometimes she'll actually, unless you have something like librarypreneur and you've made up your own word, most of the time she'll do a decent job of playing that. So we scroll down a little further. You had asked earlier about, hey, if I mark one episode clean or not, that's what we're talking about here. So if I mark this explicit, that this episode is explicit, some countries will still remove the whole show. So I'm a big fan of bleeping stuff out. But again, it's your show. Do what you want. So your description, sometimes called show notes, is where you are answering the question for your listener, should I listen to this? So this is where you want to start off with, can you believe how great this cheap microphone sounds? Et cetera, right? Something to grab them in. And from there, you can go in, and one of my favorite features is snippets. When I first saw this feature, I was like, what's so hard about typing a couple, sentences? But if it's things you do all the time, you can come in here and make a snippet. So what I want to do is I'm going to make a new one. And I'm going to be creative and call this newsletter, because sometimes we're always saying, hey, join my newsletter to get additional tips. So join my newsletter for free tips on yada, yada, yada. Go to my website.com/newsletter. And just like everything else in the episode here, I can make this a clickable link. So I'm going to highlight that and I'll do the old Control C. And then I can come up here and say, let's make that that, except that's not the thing apparently I didn't do Control C well. I failed in the Control C department today, but you know, keeping me on my toes. And obviously this is a fake website. Okay, so do that. For my sight impaired friends, I'll put in something so they know what this is. And I'm going to say open this up in a new window. I do that once. And now, anytime if I go down here and click on save, that's now in the list of snippets. So I'm here making my show notes and I'm like, oh, I got all that stuff I got to put back in. I can just click on snippets and go newsletter. Oh, by the way, don't forget to follow the show and anything that you have. I'm not sure what I put in here under mention under this episode. There we go. So anything you type in every episode, just make it a snippet. And it's just click, snippet, and show notes have just been cut in half. So I love snippets. If we, here on the right-hand side, you have an author field, and this should always be you, because you're the author of this episode. So I'd put Dave Jackson, and any kind of co-host, any guests, anything like that. So Elsie Escobar, and maybe we interviewed Rob Walsh in this episode, right? I'd want to throw Rob in there as well. And the reason this is important is Apple doesn't search every field. So they search the title of the episode, they search the title of the show, and they also search the author field. So you want to be sure to take maximum effect of that. Make sure you're getting the most out of those. Down here, tags. If you're like, what's a tag? Well, I got my little eye here, and it explains that primarily these are used by YouTube. So you could throw in some tags, any kind of keywords that might end up there on your YouTube channel. And then we have another category. This is not the one for Apple, Google, Spotify, all those. This is if you want to customize the Libsyn player or your Libsyn podcast page. So you could come here and you'll see where I've made a couple here. If you wanted one that's not one of these, you just type it in, and the next time you go to use it, it'll be there. So I know Rob, our VP of Podcaster Relations, has had many people that are in the Podcaster Hall of Fame. So he made a quick little category for that. And then he made a player that only shows the episodes that meet that category. So it's a fun little tool that you can use. Here I mentioned when we set up the podcast, hey, if the goal of this is to send traffic to your website, be sure to put that there under your podcast settings. Here, I'm in an episode. So people are listening to this on their phone, and I can send them to either A, the Libsyn podcast page. So if I'm, again, Mrs. Johnson's 7th grade class, I could do that because they don't have their own website. Or I could go here, and you would want to put the link to where people can listen to the episode on your website. So now when I'm listening on Apple Podcast or whatever app you're using, and I see a little button that says more information, when I click on that, it's going to go to whatever is in the custom permalink URL. So if that's your website, now you've got them right where you wanted them, right? The goal was to get more traffic to your website. Now they can join your newsletter and buy your book and your course or donate or whatever it is you're trying to do. And so that's what the custom permalink is. And for now, I'm just going to put in blog page because I don't have one. Here, again, if you have artwork for your episode, and starting probably, maybe, it is rumored heavily that sometime maybe next month, Apple is actually going to start showing episodic artwork. So we had show artwork, and now this is artwork for the episode. And so I know if you look at the feed, if you're not listening to the feed, you can go to thefeed.libsyn.com. Elsie does a great job of, they kind of have a template and then they change it up just a little bit for each episode. And so do you have to do that? Nope, you don't have to, but some people like it. It's one of those little icing things, just makes things stand out just a little bit. And so this is for the square one again, 1400 by 1400, all the way up to 3000 by 3000. And then you've got your wide image here as well. So for me, when it comes to the episode descriptions, I want to put some sort of paragraph that lets people know if or not they should listen to it. And the one thing that I've heard people complain about is if let's say you're interviewing an author and this book just sounds amazing, like I have to order this book, and you go to the episode notes and you check out the show notes and you're like, there's no link to Amazon. We all know we're going to go buy it at Amazon. There's no link. Now I have to remember the author's name. So the bottom line, anytime I've ever had any kind of complaint about show notes, it's where are the links? So don't forget the links. And it's super easy. If I'll grab some text here. When I click on this, you could easily go up here and make it a link here. Right now, I'm zoomed into this so we can see things easier. 9 times out of 10, these are all going to be visible, but I got things zoomed in for the webinar here. But when you're done and everything is ready, all you have to do is come down, and at the bottom, if you're doing advertising, you can come in. It's not something we're going to talk about today, but I can actually pick where I want the ads to show up. So there's no AI here that's picking it for you, which usually doesn't work very well. I can pick exactly where I want that to go. And if I scroll down a little more, you can pick what kind of ads you want. But at the bottom, I can say, hey, do I want this to go out now? Like as soon as I hit publish, it's off to the races, or do I want to schedule this? And what's great about scheduling it is if you're going on vacation, you can record a couple episodes ahead of time and just have them set to go. And if you do this, the only thing I want to point out here is you pick your your date and your time. The clock is up here at the top, so you could pick whatever date you want. But here it's, do you want it to be always available? What they're talking about is the media availability. And I want them to kind of add a little colon here. When do you want your stats to start tracking your downloads is really what this is saying. We need a little eye bubble here maybe. And if I have this set to always available, but the episode doesn't come out for a month, what that kind of does is, you'll see here in a bit, we're going to look at stats. And one of those columns is how many downloads did you get in the first 7 days? And if I have this set to publish in a month, but this is set to always have the stats available, my first 7 days are going to be 0 because it's not really public yet. So if you're scheduling things ahead of time, always have this set to based on a release schedule. And then the last little thing here right above the publish button is ID3 tags. ID3 tags were very, very popular back in 2007. And what it does is, if you're a person that's like, I've never heard of these, go ahead and click this. It's not going to hurt anything. What it does is it takes all the information we just put in, the title, the artwork, the description, and it kind of puts it into the MP3 file. And the only time you see that now, because all the modern apps today are reading everything out of your feed, but there are a few out there, still leftovers. And so if I download your file to my computer, so it's not in a podcast app anymore, it's sitting on my desktop, when I double click on it, it will use this ID3 tag information. So if you don't have, for example, let's say you didn't put in artwork. Okay, when I hit play on a Windows machine, you get this gray music note. It's not the end of the world, but branding people are like, wait, no, I need my brand there. So that's what that does. If you're like, I've never heard of these, just check the box. It doesn't hurt anything. And then I would normally click on publish. And what that does is it crosses all the T's, dots all the I's, and puts it out to your feed. A little later, we'll talk about sometimes when it says published, why isn't it in Apple yet? So we'll get to that in just a bit. But as we went up here, we said new, I want to upload a file. I came down, made my eye-catching title, put in my episode number. I made sure that my episode number was not in Apple Podcasts. I set it to clean. I added some tags for my YouTube video. If I'm sending people to my website, I definitely want to put that here. You can upload episodic artwork if you want. And then down at the bottom here, you pick your schedule, and I would just click on publish. And again, you would see it say, hey, you've been successful at that. So since we're just playing, I'm going to click on save as draft because I've got to go pick up the kids from soccer, something I can't finish this now. And here, again, you get a success. This has been saved as a draft. And the next time you want to work on this, I can just click on episodes here at the top, and it's saying, hold on, I thought I just clicked on that, but just for giggles. Sometimes you click on something on the way up and you don't realize that you changed anything. But if I go now to, let's say, the dashboard, yeah, and then you log back into Libsyn, it's the next day. If I go to episodes, you can see I've got a couple here because I've been doing webinars, and some of these have been published. So it's there to pick up. And if you're ever like, wait, I just want to look at the published stuff, there is a filter button here. So I could say, can we just show published? And there we go. Doesn't mean the other ones are deleted. It's just not there. If I just want to look at drafts, I can do that. So that's what that little funnel does here under your episode. So that's how we make an episode in Libsyn. So I'm going to come back here and check out if we have any other fun questions here. I think so far we're doing okay. Yeah, $70 mics are great. And if you have any questions along the way, be sure to put in a Q before your question, and that'll flag the team to basically have that kind of pin for me behind the scenes. So Sue and Elsie and everybody else that's here, thanks again for showing up. So we're going to move on then. We went from our dashboard to how to make an episode. Now, how do I go about promoting that? Well, when we think of promotion, we often think of things like Apple and Google and Spotify and all these different apps. And one thing I want to point out before we go to that is there is a slide I want to show you. And that is when when you submit things to Apple, it is the next slide, Dave. It's this one. And we're going to see this live in just a second. It's going to say, do you want Libsyn to submit this for you? And it's really easy to go, well, Libsyn, how nice of you to offer. Sure, do that. You don't want Libsyn to submit the podcast for you. There are those rare occasions if you're a person that can't get an Apple ID for whatever reason. Again, maybe you're Mrs. Johnson with a 7th grade class or something's going on. Then you would want Libsyn to do that. But what I want to point out is when you let Libsyn submit your show for you to Apple, we don't own your show. You still control it 100%, but there are additional stats that you can see in Libsyn. So you'll see here on this slide, you can see how many subscribers you have, how many listens you have, all sorts of other fun stats. And we would love to have those in the Libsyn dashboard, but Apple doesn't share. They want you to go to their website, which is fine. They're Apple, they can do that. And we have access to these. So this is what you're giving up if you say, yes, Libsyn, submit it for me. So that's why I always say we kind of don't want people typically to do that. So let's go back to now, how do I add my show to Apple, Google, and Spotify? So when I go here to settings, there is destinations. And so you'll see I have a couple here listed. And here it's saying, hey, Spotify requires approval. And that's on purpose because that's the way to look when you log in. When I click on this, Spotify wants you, and remember how I said anything with an asterisk is required. So here, they want me to pick a country of origin. And so all I would have to do to set up Spotify would be pick my country of origin. Here, we have this feature where if you wanted to, you could override your description and have a different description in Spotify versus one in Apple. I'm a fan of like, hey, let me have that one description under our podcast settings. I don't know anybody that uses it there, but with Libsyn, we're always making sure you're in control. You have the flexibility to do your show the way you want to do it. So normally we just scroll past this part here and come down and click on approve. And of course, you're going to read your terms of service and then click on save. So really, most of the time when you do this, and you only have to do it once, I'm going to go to the top and you'll see where I have this link to destinations, and I can come down and you'll see I've added a few here, but I've left a few at the bottom. So anything that says feed, I could go to destinations. You've heard of iHeartRadio, you've heard of Samsung, and the ones you haven't heard of, this is still thousands of people that like audio content. And so if I wanted to add myself to iHeartRadio, I could click on add. I'm going to scroll past everything that's not an asterisk and click on approve, read my terms of service, and click on save. So it's really just add, approve, save, add, approve, save, add, approve, and save. And congratulations, you're done. And at that point, when you create an episode, it will syndicate to all those different platforms. Now, you might go, but Dave, I don't see one here for Apple. Well, there's one here. It says Apple Podcast Libsyn Classic Feed. So sometimes people are like, why is this combined? There are many apps, one of them being Apple. Google is another one. There is no Google option here. And we have a tutorial on how to add your show to Google, because some places like, Apple, Google, they can kind of demand, oh, you have to do it our way. And so with Google, you can copy this link. If I go into edit here, you'll see there's a link right here to your feed. We also saw one on our dashboard, and you go over to Google and you sign in and you say, here's my feed. And they go, okay, you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around, the double authentication stuff, and you're good. So it's really simple. But here you'll see I'm in my Apple podcast, right? Because Apple just needs a traditional feed, and that's what your Libsyn Classic feed is. So any place that says we just need a podcast feed, you're going to use the Libsyn Classic feed. So here again, I'm going to scroll down, and if I click on next, remember usually it's approved save. Well, with this one, if I go next, this is that screen I was talking about where it says I want Libsyn to submit my show for me. You want to go, no, Dave said in the webinar, only do that if you don't have an Apple ID or can't get an Apple ID is really more accurate. And I'll say, no, I want to do this. So now I get all those fun-filled stats that we just saw. And then it says, oh, here's your feed. And we make it really easy. You click on this button and it will basically take you to Apple where you can go through the process. And again, we got that big I down at the bottom where you could go down and say, how do I submit my show to Apple Podcast? We've got a lovely article that'll walk you through the whole thing. But all of these you kind of just do once. And we got there by going to settings and destinations. And I always use the story of, let's say you have a 9-year-old child and they are either a princess or Spider-Man or whatever they've dressed up for. And you go, okay, here, Junior, here's our street for Halloween. All these adults are going to give you candy. You just have to go to the houses with the lights on. And do you think that little kid goes, I might go to that one. Maybe that one. Nah. And that one. No, that kid wants candy. And so they're going to go to every house and go, give me some candy. Well, in the same way as a podcaster, we're like, give me some downloads. And all these places have downloads waiting for you. I had 6,000 downloads last year from things not named Apple and Spotify. So it takes 5 minutes. So definitely do that. It doesn't take any time to do that. So that's one way that you can promote your show. The other one, and this is super simple, I'm just going to show you where this is social. And you can actually send your show out to YouTube. We talked about that earlier. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, a couple other different places here. And when you publish an episode, you can actually have it go out, or even better, you can use our social calendar. And I could go here in Libsyn 4, that was our old version of Libsyn. You can only submit, let's say, a tweet. And I'm still going to call it a tweet. I know it's X, but we're calling it a tweet today, doggone it. And you can only submit one. Well, now you can come in and say, hey, I want to add something to my calendar. So I could say, I'm going to send this on Twitter. I want it to be on whatever date. Here's my message. Hey, do you like the Beatles? We talked about them in this episode. I could do that. And then I can pick what episode I want to use. And then down here, it's telling you, hey, on this particular platform, in this case, Twitter/X, they want this size image. So you can upload the right image here and then say, where do you want this to go? And I could say, well, I want it to go to my website where all the magic happens. And I could put that in there. I could have it go to the Libsyn directory or the Libsyn podcast page, and I could schedule that. And you can go back then, you would see on your calendar anything that you've scheduled ahead of time. So if you're using something like Hootsuite or any of those social scheduling kind of tools, you've got one built into Libsyn. So those are different ways that you can easily promote your show and get more downloads. So with that, I'm going to come over and double check. Can we, I think we're good. Excellent. All right. Again, if you have a question, just put in Q there at the bottom before your question, and we will be good to go. All right. So we've put we started off, right? We're on our dashboard. We went into settings. We went to podcast and set up our podcast. We came to episodes, right? Or we could just click on new, and you could upload your episode there. We put in all our stuff. It's out there. We've set up our social destinations. We've set up all of our destinations, Apple, Google, and Spotify. And again, you only have to do those once. Now I want to see what's working. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch shows here because this is a fake show. We've been able to kind of get a few fake downloads there as well. but I want to show the feed. And so I'll pick this one. And so you can see here, when you're in your dashboard, we give you a little bit, like a quick snapshot again of what's going on with your show. So you get some of that information here on the front. But when you click on the stats button, now you've got many more snapshots. So I've got my total, I've got my how many did I get this week and this month. And if you ever wonder what's IAB, that is the industry standard for that. And then you have unique. When you choose unique, you will see your numbers go up, but that's not the industry standard. The Libsyn stats from years ago are not quite as strict as the IAB. IAB, the big metric that everybody talks about is if somebody is on your website and they click play, if they listen to a minute of that content, it counts as a download. If they listen to 10 seconds of it, it doesn't. And so that's why the default is IAB. That's the industry standard. If you are an Excel nerd and love to crunch numbers, you'll see a lot of this download options here. And so as we scroll down, it shows you your last 5 episodes. And so remember when I was talking about your first 7 days, if you wanted to compare those and kind of declutter this graph, I can turn off some of this information. So now I'm just comparing the first 7 days here. So you can customize this depending on what you're looking for. It's really easy to customize that graph. If I scroll down a little further, we've got this is what I was talking about earlier, that table that has your first 7, first 30, and first 90. What's nice about this, if I scroll down here to where we actually get some 90-day stats, it's really easy to look at this and go, is my show growing? Are they going up? Is it staying the same? Super simple to just see with this particular layout. If I go down a little further, you'll see there is this line here. And this line is somewhat important because it's in line with the date picker here. So if I click on this, we have a bunch of things where you could say, give me this year, give me the last 30 days or 90 days, and it will automatically select those for you. And you could say, hey, let's select those dates. And it comes down, and I'm looking at daily stats. You'll see where you can also look at monthly and weekly. But I wanted to show daily because sometimes we're not sure what's going on, but holy cow, where did all these downloads come from? Like, I didn't think I was that popular. Well, when I put my mouse over this little circle here, you'll see where it gets ever so slightly bigger. And when it does that, I can click on this and you'll see where it's going to do a little number crunching and it will show like what was happening on August 22nd, 2023. And I'll give you an example. I have an episode from 2005 and it's still getting downloads 18 years later. So I can see here, no, it's not censorship is their latest episode. So the reason they got a spike on August 22nd is they released a new episode. So that's always going to cause a bit of a spike. But you can see here where if I go to the next page that some of these are getting 3 downloads. And if I keep going here, you will find out that there are episodes. This got 1 download from an episode from June in 2022. And so people will find your show. And if they like it, they will actually start to download your back catalog. So how we did that again is we're looking at our daily stats and you just put your mouse over the little kind of circle at the top here and click on that and that will pop that out. So, but just to show you, I can come here and say, show me monthly stats. So we just had 3 months. So it's showing here. I believe this is the fake version of the feed if you're wondering about these stats. But I can zoom in, I can zoom out here depending I want to do. So that's a really handy chart just for like, what's going on here? Are things going up or down? Or why did all these downloads come in? And when you change the date here, this is now everything under that line is affected. So when I come down here, these numbers are different because we're only looking at 3 months. But this is just a list of all of your downloads. So if I click here on downloads, you'll see I got the weird number 1 finger and I can click on that. And this will show me, yes, old stuff. And then if I click again, I can see my highest rated or most downloaded episode is this one. And anytime if you wanted to, I could click on this and basically get the exact same screen that we're looking at, but it will only be stats for that episode, where this is stats for the show, not so much just an episode. But if we go down a little further, we have downloads by country. And this is really handy, especially if you're a person like a comedian or a performer and you want to go on tour. I can see where my audience is. So if I come down here and click on United States, it'll zoom in on that. I can see what state I'm most popular in. And again, there's our download button for all of our Excel nerds that want to do some number crunching, but there's also a markets. And so you can kind of get a little more information, in this case, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. So if I'm booking a tour, this is where I'm going to have those first couple dates here. It makes it really easy to see where is my audience. And so if I want to go back to where I was, I can click on home and we're back to here. But it's kind of, startling when you first start off. You're like, wait, somebody is listening to me in, Sweden. Yep. United Arab Emirates. Yep. Denmark, France. It's like it's just me in a spare bedroom. Yep. And they're listening to you. So don't let that imposter syndrome creep in. Down here, user agents is a fancy name for apps. So you can see how many downloads you're getting from Apple Podcast, Overcast. Chrome is just somebody listening on your website. Pocket Cast. Here's another. Some of these apps you may not have heard of, but those are here. And then over here, this is when you set up those destinations, you can see how many you're getting from each destination. So the Libsyn Classic feed will always be the most because that's powering Apple, it's powering Google, and many other apps. So that's always going to be the number one. So you can kind of get more insights here. And then at the bottom, if you are having Libsyn submit your show to YouTube, you can actually get views, estimated watch time, which is always a soul-crushing stat, estimated minutes watched, and then view duration. So that's here. You don't have to go to YouTube to get that. So those are your stats, and it really makes it easy to understand what's working, what's not, where my audience is coming from, and help you then make decisions on, we need to do more of this. Or this, I had this guest on and they just blew up. I need to have them back on my show. And that again is at the top of the screen under stats. So we've seen our dashboard, we've played with episodes, we did stats. Social again is where you can schedule to have a post go out. And advertising we're not going to cover today. And then here under settings is where we started off here by going to our podcast settings. But with that, that's an overview. So that's really if we go back to this, that's really the step. Set up your podcast. And again, anything you put there, you can always change later. Your podcast is a recipe. It's not a statue. So if you say later, oh, I should have put this in my description, or I don't like my artwork, you can always change. I've changed my artwork multiple times. I change my show description about once a year. And every time I look at it, I go, ugh, what was I thinking? But at the time, I thought it was great. So you can always change that later. You have to have at least one episode published. I know a lot of people like to start off with 3 published. It's your show. Do whatever you want, but you have to have 1 published so that when you submit your show to Apple and Google and Spotify, if there's not 1 episode, they'll reject you. So have at least 1 episode published, listed in all those destinations. You only have to do that once. And then from there, promote, make great content, and interact with your audience whenever possible to find out what they want. And what's the old thing on a shampoo bottle? Lather, rinse, repeat. Keep doing that. So let me see if you guys have any other questions. If not, I got one thing I talked about how there's one other slide I want to show here. So let me go back to my slideshow. And the number one probably question I get in support is this one. In fact, speaking of support, I saw this slide earlier. And that is when you contact support, you can just email us support@libsyn.com. Be specific. And I totally understand this, that you're panicked, your show isn't doing what you want it to do. So you email support and go, it's not working. My podcast is broken. Well, okay, which show is it? We have a few. And then by broken, what's broken? What are you doing? Just be as specific as you can. Provide the name of your show. If you can email us from the email you use to log in, then in the event that you go, it's broken, help me now, I can at least look up your show because you emailed us from the email you used to log in. So I can do a little bit of research that way. And if you're ever wondering if you're giving us too much information, no, you're never giving support too much information. So that's one thing. But I get this question a lot, and that is, hey, why isn't my show showing up in Apple? Well, first, you could always go here. I mentioned the big I in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can type in something here. We have a ton of articles that'll walk you through that, as well as things like product updates. You'll see these little bubbles pop up, and we're always communicating with you, looking for feedback like, hey, here's the new thing we just launched. And you can say, that looks great, or wait, what? And then we can make sure you're getting the most out of Libsyn. But I will have people say, hey, I published this episode. It says published, it says released in Libsyn, but it's not showing in Apple Podcast. And I totally get that. It makes sense that it says published. Why isn't it there? And so I always use the kind of the analogy. We all know Netflix. And let's say you're in the living room and you turn on Netflix and you start watching that new comedy special. And boy, is it funny. This is great. But hey, it's getting late. I'm going to listen to the rest of this in the bedroom. So you go to the bedroom and you put it on and you get the red spinning circle of death from Netflix. It's just not connecting. Now, the question you might ask yourself, well, there's a problem with Netflix. Well, no, there isn't, because if there was a problem with Netflix, it wouldn't have worked in the living room. Does that make sense? Sure. Okay, I get that. It's worked in the living room. There's something wrong with either the internet or the TV, but we know Netflix is working. You're like, okay, Dave, but what does this have to do with podcasting? If you go and you publish your show and it's in Spotify, but it's not in Apple, that's kind of like it's working in the living room, but it's not in the bedroom. It's working in Spotify. It hasn't shown up in Apple. When you hit published, think of the word released as available. It's available to be seen now. It's public, but much like a school bus comes around and picks up kids, Apple comes around to see, hey, any new episodes, and Spotify does the same thing, but they're not on the same schedule. So you may actually see your episode in Spotify before you see it in Apple. And if you see that, well, then we know Libsyn's working. Because if Libsyn was working, well, if it wasn't working, let's go that route. If Libsyn was having a problem, it wouldn't be in Spotify or Apple or Google. But when you see it in one, you can check off, okay, Libsyn is working. Apple just needs to catch up. And so the other thing I want to point out is, thank you for your questions that you submitted. But if ever you want a little bit of coaching, we do offer that. You can go to libsyncoaching.com and schedule a little bit of one-on-one time with myself. And that can be, hey, can you do an audit of my Libsyn account? I want to make sure I'm getting the most out of it, or just anything you have a question on. I said at the beginning, Libsyn's goal is to help you grow your audience, hence liberated syndicating it everywhere. And so we want you to be successful. That's why we have our directory. That's why if you have a promo for your show, submit it to the feed. We're always trying to help you grow your show. And so one of the ways we do that is by offering coaching as well. So with that, I'm going to take one last look here around the Q&A. We do have a pinned message. Thank you for this one. It says, Tom, do you say your episode with post, publish, drop, or some other term? Do you say your episode? Help me out, Tom. I'm getting lost on the word say. Do you say your episode with the post, publish, or drop, or the term? I usually use publish. I published an episode, if that's what you mean. I know the kids might say drop. I'm going to drop a new episode on Tuesday. But if you can I'm looking here to see, I think that's what you mean, but that's typically the term. I publish an episode and then it syndicates out in the same way that a radio person is talking into a microphone. It is then broadcasted through a frequency, right? We all kind of understand radio. And really all that's happened is radios have been, this is the new radio, right? I don't have to tune a dial to get my favorite show. I just subscribe to their feed. And when somebody puts out a new episode, it goes through your feed, which is Libsyn, and we then get it to where you can subscribe to it on your phone. So thank you for that question. I hope I got that answered for you. Do you say your episode with post, publish, drop? Yeah, I usually say publish, but if you want to say drop or whatever else, that's perfectly fine. So don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. This is where the replay is going to end up, along with replays of the feed and all the great information. I know there's one from Brian from our Advertise Cast team. He and I believe it's Elsie or Katie Kermitzos is talking about advertising. It's any kind of subject you're looking for. Our YouTube channel is a wealth of knowledge. So thank you again so much for taking the time out of your day to sit back and learn a little bit about podcasting to help you get up and running. Never, ever, ever hesitate to reach out to the support team. We love to help podcasters. That's what we do. So thank you so much. That email again, support@libsyn.com. And we will see you next month with another episode here of Getting Up and Going with your podcast. I'm Dave Jackson. I am the head of podcaster education here at Libsyn.com, and we'll see you next month. Take care.